So when I first started to paint landscapes, I never would have thought that this painting could have come from this photo. And looking back, I realized that there was certain knowledge. It was almost like a secret that I just didn't know about landscape painting. And that's what I want to share with you in this video today. All right, if you're new to the channel, then welcome to Paint Coach. My name's Chris Fornatero, and I help thousands of students every single month get better at painting through my online courses, tutorials, and YouTube channel, and my Instagram. Now, this video is actually the third and final video of a series where I walked through the steps of doing this painting. So if you want to see how I got here and you haven't seen those videos, I highly recommend checking those out. I'll put links to where you can watch those in the description of this video. So let's get back to where we left off, and this is where we left off. This is the painting at the end of the last video and kind of where I was. Again, if you haven't seen that video, check it out because I talk about all the plans that I had for this, and a lot of those plans didn't happen. So you see here, I still have the house in light, and that was the biggest change. As you can see here, I decided to put all of this in shadow, and pretty much it was just, I felt like this vibrant ocean was just competing too much with this, and it just, I don't know, it wasn't very dynamic. I feel like one needed to take a back seat a little more. And just kind of having this whole foreground, having part of it in shadow and then a little bit in light. I don't know. I just felt like I needed to fully commit and just put it all in shadow. So that's actually what I did. I actually kind of just did what I'm doing here in Photoshop right now. And I just kind of tested it out. Get a lot of people asking me like, oh, is Photoshop worth it? I'm like, I use it almost every single day with painting because it allows me to make changes like this that, and see what my painting would look like very quickly and easy without having to actually paint on it. And so I'm like, ooh, okay, I actually like that now. Like I stand back, I'm like, I feel like that's a more kind of powerful image like that. And I was like, and I can put in the glowing lights. I can grab like a orange or something just to kind of see how that looks. And even though it's going to be pretty vibrant, bright in there, it's nowhere compared to this. So there's not going to be like a power struggle there in terms of attention. And then I probably also will just put this all in shadow as well. All right, and so this is where we ended up. And honestly, a big part of this was just composition. Everything from kind of figuring out where to put this mountain. I had it all, I kept moving it around. Sometimes I had the peak kind of come over here, added over here. And I like how this line here points us this way. And then it's broken up by the house, which is nice. This counteracts this angle. You got this right there. And just kind of paying attention to the lines of the scene is always very helpful. And kind of where they're all pointing. And it's kind of bringing us more towards here. And this is still getting your attention. You still kind of got this path to lead up there. But my main concern was just making sure that the viewer's eye never got stuck in one part of the painting. Another thing is tangents, of being aware not to, say, have this mountain come and line up perfectly with that house. Like I didn't want that to happen. I also didn't want to have the peak of this to line up perfectly right there, which easily could have happened. If this kind of came here and then this had it came there, you don't want stuff like that. You don't want stuff to line up. I had to be aware of that with how high I put that, opposed to that, opposed to this, opposed to that. Like I never wanted to bring the tree and have the tree perfectly lined up. And it's funny because our minds would like automatically do that. So you have to be very aware not to have something like that happen. So yes, like a lot of the things that I did were composition based. And now if you struggle with composition, you like I don't even know where to start. I know exactly how that feels. Like that's how I was for the longest time. That's actually one of these secrets that I just didn't know about. Like I remember people talking about composition and I knew some basic stuff like, oh, like you don't want lines going directly off into the corners and rules of thirds and all that stuff. But I never had anybody like directly teach me composition and kind of the cause and effect of it, and doing this will cause this to happen. And, also incorporating values, how values play a part in composition. So if you want to know more about composition, I've made a completely free composition coaching guide, series of short videos that will teach you composition so you can implement it in your own paintings. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. But getting back to this idea of secret knowledge, like Chris, like what are you talking about secret knowledge? Well, it was secret in that nobody told me about it. Like it took me a long time. Like I've been painting for quite a while, and I feel like it took me a long time to just understand. I feel like the big secret of it all is that you have to come to a landscape painting with previous knowledge already, which is a little bit different than what you're taught when you first start painting. Like if you go into a painting class, I had this happen tons of times. You go into a painting class, whether it was in college or anywhere, and what are they going to do? They're going to set up a model, person, or they'll set up a still life and they'll say, all right, paint that. And so much of the instruction is like, oh, check that value, check that color. Oh, you see how her elbow is bent a little more. Like, oh, you see how, like, it's all copy, 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 which you need to know how to do, which is extremely important, your observational skills and seeing what's going on. And so what happened with me was I went out plein air painting and I was like trying to do that. And like, the sun's moving and things are different. And it's, there's just so much information that it's almost impossible to like try and document it all or to paint in the way that you would, if you set up a pot of flowers or a person to paint. And there was just certain things that I learned along the way that I'm like, oh, like, why didn't anybody teach me that? Or why did it take so long? I didn't know that I needed to know that going into a painting. One of which is just changing the scene and moving things to make it work compositionally. For like this, for example, like the reference photo looks nothing like this, but I knew certain things about composition. And I was like, oh, I think I can make this work. And actually, and within that, there's other things that you can know. For example, like any foliage, grass, trees, stuff like that, whenever it's in the shade, like the sun's not directly hitting it, you can count on it to be cooler on the top and get warmer towards the bottom. Meaning like in these bushes, like down towards the bottom, I have a green. So let's put it right there. And it's a pretty warm green, but the top, it's getting the reflected light from the blue sky. The direct sunlight's not hitting it, but it's getting it on top. I've actually talked about this in depth in another video. I'll actually put a link to it above right now. But you can see it's just slightly cooler on the top opposed to the bottom. Like that's very helpful to know. And that's not something you're necessarily going to see when you're out there, especially if you're not looking for it. And this is true pretty much with anything in the shadows, like this dirt, for example, like look how cool it is. And I had no real reference for this. I knew that, if it's a lighter colored dirt, it's kind of this lighter, almost sand, that it's going to be getting the blue reflected light from the sky. And so I made sure to paint it that way. Also, like when it comes to light, just understanding how light acts, and I've talked about it in a previous video of thinking about it almost like spray paint. And the warm light, since I had to make up all of this in here, I also had to make up what that light was reaching. And you can see these bushes, I made sure to push some of that warm light on these bushes because it was, it was close enough to the light that it's going to get some of that glowing effect to it. Coming back to a compositional thing, I knew that it was good to have a lead into a painting. That's why I put this path here, and even more specifically why I wanted this little bit of grass in between the path, because I knew it was one more little triangle and little arrow pulling the viewer's eye into the scene. Another bit of this secret knowledge is just how you go about painting things. For example, this mountain in the background, the reference that I had, I had a whole bunch of detail and you could see a whole lot, but I purposefully kept it simple and kept these shapes simple. And I didn't put a whole ton of these little blue shapes. I very much could have, kind of gone in here and put some everywhere. Like there's a lot of them, but I was like, no, I know that I need this to sit in the background. And so putting less detail into it, kind of painting it more simply, is going to go a long way in helping it sit in the distance like that. Another thing is just the form. It was practically impossible to pick it up in the photo, but just knowing the form of these hills, and you can see it's slightly lighter here than it is here because the sun is coming from this way. It's very easy to tell actually right here, like this little shadow, then it gets lighter, just giving that subtle form to give those hills some actual weight. Another thing is just being aware of the flow of the painting. In the previous videos, I talked about, why I put this in the foreground, to just have more levels to the scene, and also just help the flow of, this is the closest thing in the scene. And so you kind of start in here, and then you flow to the house, and then you kind of come back down the person on the bike, and then you kind of go up to the little town here, and you go up, and then you kind of fall back into the down the side of the mountain to the house again. And you can just kind of see this flow that is being choreographed with the angles and the lines and the subject matter. Forget which book it was in. It was either in Edgar Payne's book or Carlson's book. And they said that God didn't create perfect landscapes for lousy artists, meaning that you're going to have to kind of choreograph things and move things to make a good painting. Now, there are varying degrees of this. There are some landscape painters that don't move much of anything and still make an absolutely great painting. There's those that change everything, and it's like, wow, like, how'd you get that from that? But just the point of this video and what I want you to walk away from this is that landscape painting is a translation process, not a copying process. I feel more so than, portrait or still life, in that you really have to come to it with certain knowledge about how light works, how composition works, how depth works. Knowing those things are going to help you execute a good painting. If you come in thinking you can just copy it exactly like you're painting a bowl of fruit or a live model, you're going to run into a lot of problems. I know, because I was there. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed this video series. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you would like some quick 1-minute bite-sized lessons, I have those on my Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.